secretary stays at the bar. So if you want cabinet secretaries on the floor of this house, then you must admit them as members of parliament. That changes the numbers, that changes the functions. And is it a good thing? No. First, because you will definitely weaken the committee system. Our constitution gives committees so many powers, the powers of the High Court, which have never been used. Why haven't we used them? If we can't use them as 15 or 20 people sitting and we have the power, what is the assurance that as over 349 we will use them? And Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, mark you that when you do that, something else comes into play. There's a reason why there's a prescription in composition of committees. Those of the majority always have a majority of one. But in the oversight committees, those in the minority have a majority of one. So that in the oversight committees, we can better check the national executive. If we come here with the numbers the way now playing, there will be no oversight. The oversight committees will be dead. Parliament as a plenary will be doing put the question. And the question will be put and the CSS will go. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, lastly, that we might think we are strengthening parliamentary democracy, but we are weakening it. And we must be very careful, including on the question of numbers. You must know that the question of numbers in terms of gender representation goes against the contrary question of the cost. Are Kenyans prepared to pay 100 more members of parliament or not? I think the fundamental question we must ask ourselves, do we still need 2 houses of parliament today? If you ask me that, I would say no. Thank you so much, because we have entrenched devolution sufficiently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much, well said. I hope you get a chance to pursue those arguments at the right time. The Honorable Timothy Rotich of Market West.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this heavy subject matter. Mr. Speaker, I know it's not very easy to speak after listening to wisdom from Senior Counsel Otiende Omolo, but Mr. Speaker, I can only say this, that looking at the intention of the president, it only takes a president who believes in constitutionalism and the rule of law to be able to propose such raft of constitutional amendments. Mr. Speaker, if you have a president who still believes that we still need a strong opposition in this country, then as a country, we must be proud of that president. Because if it was any other president, his intention would be to suppress the opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, looking at this document that we have today, Otiende Omolo has talked about that the president has initiated a constitutional amendment. In my opinion, this is a memorandum. This cannot qualify as an initiation of a constitutional amendment. This is a memorandum requesting Parliament to institute a constitutional amendment and cannot therefore be interpreted to mean the president has initiated a constitutional amendment. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the issues in a broader perspective. On the issue of gender inclusion and affirmative action, Mr. Speaker, it must be alive to this assembly that already as we speak, the court has made a finding to the effect that this house is not properly constituted and is not in conformity with the law. So it is a matter that we must take up seriously. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the proposal by the president, and I associate myself fully with that proposal. The president has argued that currently this house has 290 members of parliament. So a third of it, we shall have 97 members of parliament who are women, if in terms of gender, as currently constituted. So, Mr. Speaker, the proposal by the president is a sound proposal that, if adopted, will be able to make the equation easier in terms of amending the constitution to input the gender principle. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the issue, on the same issue, the proposal by the president, which if adopted by this house will be progressive, is he has provided that the law be amended to establish a women's inclusion and political participation fund. Mr. Speaker, gender inclusion should be progressive and realized at a certain end. The issue of including women in the Constitution shall not be there forever. That is why he has proposed, and I associate myself that there be a sunset clause to retire it upon attainment of the constitutional requirement. So as we retire to amend this Constitution, we should remember that we should have a sunset clause, because there shall come a time that we shall have equality in this country, so that we avoid this gender of trying to assist the other gender. The issue of CDF and the Senate oversight and the NGAF, Mr. Speaker, I fully support it, that we entrench it in the Constitution. And the reason for that is that in the event that the matter is taken to court, then to amend a legislation or a statute is easier than to amend the Constitution. So that if a question comes as to the constitutionality of CDF or NGAF or the Senate Oversight Fund, then it may require a referendum in future in order to amend it. That is why I fully support the same. And Mr. Speaker, in terms, I also support the Senate Oversight, the Senate Oversight Fund, so that currently, as we speak, there is a lot of wastage in the government, in the counties, so that Senate can be properly empowered to be able to check the excesses of the county governments. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the official leader of opposition, Mr. Speaker, Montesquieu talked of separation of powers. He's the father of separation of powers. Mr. Speaker, for a country to function properly, right now as we speak, we have a serious minority in the opposition. For a country to function properly, we must have an office of the leader of opposition. And the reason for that is that that office will be able to check the excesses of the government. Mr. Speaker, it is very dangerous to have a government that is not properly checked. So, Mr. Speaker, instead of the leader of opposition going to the streets, let him come to this House and advance the interests of the minorities at the floor of this House. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the proposals in totality. The time shall come. My senior, Mr. Atenda Amolo, has talked about that it requires a referendum. Any proposal, whether be it parliamentary or is it or one initiated by through public initiative, if it is initiated by this House and it is accepted by this House, and it comes to the determination whether we require a referendum, then that matter shall be taken to a referendum, irrespective of where it originates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support this memorandum.
Honorable Malim Farah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, we are going to be making very fundamental changes into our system of government that will impact on generations to come. It is only fair that we give it the utmost thought and not think about the political expediency of the day, but think about, for posterity, how this country is going to be. Mr. Speaker, I had said this somewhere else. I was in this House myself, in the 7th Parliament, pushing for a constitutional agenda, rewriting of the Constitution, a new Constitution, and saying that it must come from Wanjiku. It must come from the ordinary people out there. At that time, our head of state, the late Moi, I was in the opposition, was wondering why 222 educated, elected leaders of this country would want to surrender the role of thinking for the future of this country to somebody who's out there in the streets, who is either roasting maize or who's either doing a small thing there. I had a problem with that, but now I never thought that was going to bite me again and come back to us. I am convinced that we made a mistake, and we should have listened in part, not in totality, to that late sage and listened to his ideas. None of the American 37 constitutional amendments that were done in the US did require a referendum. Personally, I am convinced, by and large, except in matters that touch on very pertinent issues in 255 of the, I think 255 of the Constitution, this House has the capacity and the powers to amend any Constitution and do a lot of work on the Constitution. When we were trying to put this Constitution together, rewrite it, this Constitution we have today, in terms of the governance, whether it's going to be a presidential system or it's going to be a parliamentary system, became a victim to the political intrigues of that day. There was a split within my party, which was called ODM that time, and then there was this other group which had advocated for a devolution that was going to be 13 or 14 different regions in the country, based pretty much on the way the provinces were then, plus a few provinces that were super big and that were going to be split into 3 or 2. And then there were those people who were opposed to devolution completely. Then there was the issue of parliamentary and presidential system. Both of them became victims to the political intrigues of that time, where there was a lot of political infighting, both within ODM and also other centers. Mr. Speaker, we had a system that was a hybrid of a presidential system and a parliamentary system. We had a president who had a constituency, and people went and voted for their president of choice. But that president came in here to be sworn in as the MP for Odaya, as the MP for Baringo Central, as the MP for whatever he wanted. And if he failed to secure the presidential votes, he will still come to the parliament as a member of parliament for that constituency and lead the opposition from here. Lead the opposition from here. We had a system in which the ministers were from parliament. And because they were from parliament, we could censure them. I remember one day sitting on that chair, Mr. Speaker, and I sent 8 ministers out of the House because they did not come up with satisfactory answers that is, in the opinion of the House, and in my opinion also, satisfactory and befitting their status in the country and the manner in which they should represent, how Kenyans should be governed. And I told them, you're not going to transact any more business until you come up with answers that are going to satisfy this House. And the president told them, do you know what you have done, you people? When this kind of thing happens, that government resigns. That is a censure motion on the government because you did not do your job right. And Kibaki warned his own ministers and told them, you go to parliament, parliament is supreme, parliament has got that, you must attend to the issues on parliament and act accordingly and fast enough on issues that are raised by members of parliament. Today, you have ministers who we don't even know their names. I don't know most of them their names now. And during our time when we were growing up, people like the MP for Kwanza, who is an old guy like me, although he pretends to be young and dyes his hair. You remember we used to have all the ministers, cabinet ministers in primary school on our own walls there. And we knew all the names of all the ministers in the country. And you knew the ordinary person out there in the village knew if they had issues with education, that minister must do something better than he's doing now. And when the delegations come to Gatundu, the ordinary people used to come and complain about such and such minister is sleeping on his job. We have a problem in education. We have a problem in roads and infrastructure. We have a problem in public works. We have a problem in local government. And that is why the late Mudavadi was such a famous guy. He was bigger than life because local government is the area where all the country was represented. Municipalities, county councils, town councils, urban councils. We cannot bring in 20 strangers into the House and call them ministers that you have no powers to censure them. You can't tell them get out of the House and don't come back to this House until you're able to do your job right. How are you going to censor a minister who does not come with a satisfactory answer here? A minister who's sleeping on the job. Based on the proceedings of the House at that time, I think what we need to do is that we have to admit that we made certain mistakes. We borrowed from the German lander. We borrowed from the Americans something. We borrowed something from the British. And then we tried to put together that thing for it to work. We are always people who want to borrow. I mean, we Africans must come up with our own narrative. It's like saying you have a car with an engine of Audi, with the chassis of Mercedes, and with a body of, and what do you call an electoral system of Toyota. How far will that car take you? It can't take you. This constitution is similar to that. We need to revisit that. As far as the issue of the national government affirmative action fund is concerned, I had been advocating for something similar to that from the beginning. I said instead of setting
Therefore, I don't like to rattle government. Honorable Nyikal knows what I mean. But I think Honorable Nyikal now is completely out of order because, one, the Honorable Nyikal does not sit in the House Business Committee, and indeed this matter was discussed in the House Business Committee and approved by the House Business Committee. And I've just sought the indulgence of the House because it was an oversight by the clerk's office, whoever prepared the order paper, not to have the procedural motion. And Honorable Speaker, again, the procedural motion is being done under your approval because you just called me out to move the procedural motion in line with the point of order that he had raised. Therefore, unless the Honorable Nyikal does not want to sit in the House, and is free to take leave, but allow the other members who are in this House who want to debate these important issues for the nation to debate. Honorable Speaker, I had moved and sought the Honorable Member for Kwanza to second, if you...
Honorable members, pursuant to Standing Order number 1, it says, in cases where matters are not expressly provided for by the standing orders or by orders of the House, any procedural motion shall be decided by the Speaker. I think in this case, the Leader of Majority has sought leave, and I think I will ask for the approval of the House to grant him the leave to proceed with this procedural motion. So I will now propose the question. It's already been okay, let him second, okay.
Madam Speaker, despite all this confusion, I take this opportunity to second the motion because it's important that we talk about this motion so that, you know, we can together can go forward. So, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I don't see anything wrong with this motion, and therefore I second the motion.
I now propose that leave be granted for the motion on the general debate on the proposal of Parliament to consider amending the Constitution and the standing order does proceed. Can I put the question? I now put the question that leave be granted for the motion on general debate on the proposal to Parliament to consider amending the Constitution and standing orders be allowed as a procedural motion on limitation of time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of that opinion, contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it. You're outnumbered, Dr. Nyikal.
Honorable Speaker, I do hope that our good friends, the new members of Parliament, are learning from experienced legislators like Dr. Nyikal, because there are many ways of skinning a cat, and you could see his sole intention was not to have this continue. But Honorable Speaker, I think it's only fair that now that we have put that vote, Honorable Speaker, I was saying, this memorandum by the President, Honorable Speaker, touches on a number of very pertinent issues, Honorable Speaker. Top among them is the issue that we already had general debate on, and not all we're asking this morning, Honorable Speaker, is for members to ventilate, members to have that general debate on the various proposals contained in that memorandum. I was saying a number of, part of those issues we had actually had general debate on, the issue of the Affirmative Action Fund, GAF, the issue of the Senate Oversight Fund, and of course the issue of NGCDF funds. We already had the general debate, you remember, in the first session, and in the same general debate that we seek to have on the other proposals on the 2/3 gender rule and the creation of the office of Leader of Official Opposition, and of course the proposed amendment to our own standing orders on having cabinet secretaries appear in the House to answer to questions, statements, and issues that are of concern to the people of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, members will recall that in the 11th Parliament, the Honorable Aden Duale, as Leader of Majority, did bring a bill to amend the Constitution to actualize the 2/3 affirmative, 2/3 gender rule principle in the Constitution. And I think also in the 12th Parliament, all these attempts failed. I think also in the 11th Parliament, the Honorable Chepkonga, then as chair of JLAC, had an attempt. And of course, yours sincerely, the Speaker herself, has had an attempt to amend the Constitution to actualize this 2/3 gender principle in the bill that was sponsored by none other than yourself, Honorable Speaker, Gladys Bose-Sholei. And I think there is also the current bill that you have also, the Speaker has also proposed in her capacity as a member of Parliament. And that bill had actually been allowed to, by the House Business Committee, and I'm advised it was notified to the House Business Committee that the Honorable Speaker has agreed to, not really step it down, but to allow debate, because this debate will only go to enrich part of the proposals that the Honorable Sholei and any other member would have on the question of the 2/3 gender rule. And I think over time, members will appreciate that the 3 or 4 attempts to actualize the 2/3 gender rule has been a struggle. And indeed, in all occasions, I think the last one, we could not even raise the 2/3 majority to be able to pass that particular amendment. And sadly, it took the former Chief Justice, the Honorable Maraga, writing to the President, the then President Uhuru Kenyatta, to take action and dissolve the House because the House was said to be unconstitutional. This, Honorable Speaker, persists today. As we are currently constituted, we are yet to achieve that 2/3 gender rule. And therefore, it could also be said that this House is not constitutionally constituted. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, the President, in his wisdom, in his memorandum, has sought to help the House think through some of the proposals, as the Honorable Sholei has thought through her proposals on how do we actualize this so that we can constitute the House constitutionally and in line with what was provided for in our 2010 Constitution, that no single gender will be more than 2/3. And those who are less, then there will be measures taken and through legislation or amendments to the Constitution to actualize the 2/3 gender rule. Honorable Speaker, If you read the President's memoranda, Honorable Speaker, with the number of our women legislators elected in this Parliament, Honorable Speaker, other than the 47 county women reps that are actually affirmative seats, we have another 28 single-member constituency MPs, some of whom are seated here, and I noted the Honorable Amushomba, the Honorable Member for Moiben, who are representing single-member constituencies. And congratulations to these very good ladies who had to fight it out among us many other aspirants who are seeking to lead constituencies, and they made it. Honorable Speaker, we can only encourage our women to fight it out in elections for us to eventually have elected members, not just nominated members into this House, who will help us achieve the 2/3 gender rule. But in the absence of that, Honorable Speaker, then we have no choice but to make amendments to the Constitution that will ensure that we achieve this 2/3 gender rule. I hear the member for Endebes adding the indomitable member for Narok North, the Honorable Agnes, who also is a single constituency member in Narok constituency, and in a very difficult terrain in Narok North, in a community that initially did not believe in the power and leadership of women. But if the people of Narok North, the people of Kajiado, the people of Moiben, the people of Githunguri, the people of Samburu West, the people of, which other constituency? Kitui South, the people of Laikipia, the Honorable Sarah Korere, many Kenyans in areas that the societies were very patriarchal and never believed in the leadership of women, today appreciate that women can also make very good leaders, and they are as good, if not better, than men leaders, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, it is up to this House, Honorable Speaker, to debate and see how then do we actualize this. Over time, Honorable Speaker, it may be that it is the other gender, the male gender, that will need affirmative action. You never know. If you look at our society today, Honorable Speaker, the boy child today is more endangered than the girl child. And therefore, those of us who sit in this House as men, we must know our days are numbered. And we must therefore ensure that we make amendments to the Constitution that will protect not just our daughters and our mothers, our aunties and our sisters, but also protect ourselves and our sons, because we are endangered. The threat to the boy child today, Honorable Speaker, by alcoholism, drug and substance abuse, and general neglect by society. 30, 20 years ago, Honorable Speaker, this country moved towards empowerment of the girl child. And the girl child is so empowered today, that is why we can confidently count many members of Parliament, including those in Homa Bay, who are ladies who have been elected by people, by people in their constituencies. And many ladies are leading big corporations, East African breweries, and many other big corporations in this country are under the leadership of very able women. And therefore, it is unfair that we continue as a political unit or political establishments not to have ladies at the forefront of our leadership, of the leadership of our country. And therefore, I want to encourage members, let us not look at this 2/3 gender rule or principle as something that is targeting women. It is both women and men. It is gender principle, not women principle. And gender is not women, it is both genders. Fortunately, Honorable Speaker, in this country, we don't have the issues that we see in the West of the transgender people. So we are talking of only the two genders, either the female or the male gender. Honorable Speaker, the other provision, I don't need to belabor the question of the affirmative action funds, NGCDF, Senate oversight. These funds, Honorable Speaker, we had debate on them, and we know how sensitive NGCDF is, how sensitive NGAF is, how sensitive it is to have funds for the Senate to be able to oversight the billions, if not trillions, that are being devolved to our county governments, Honorable Speaker, and I don't need to belabor that. Honorable Speaker, on the question of cabinet secretaries appearing in the House, and I've had the opportunity to listen to many of our friends who think or imagine that allowing members of the cabinet to appear, and I think, Honorable Speaker, having seen what the subcommittee on the House Procedures Committee has proposed, there is no proposal to have cabinet secretaries to come and sit or stand where we are privileged to have been elected by the people of Kenya, and we stand in plenary here today or on the seats where we sit. But at the bar, Honorable Speaker, we will create provision. There is a proposal to create provision at the bar, just like we admit the cabinet secretary for the National Treasury every year in June as he comes to table his revenue estimates, Honorable Speaker, or we allow the president during the state opening or state of the nation address to come and address the House from the bar, from where, Honorable Speaker, you sit. We will allow cabinet secretaries then to come and answer to questions, statements, and issues that are of concern to the people of Kenya from the bar. And I mean the bar here. I can see the Honorable Kaluma pointing to the other bar. It is not the other bar, I mean this bar in the chamber. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, from this bar, or from where the civil servants row, cabinet secretaries can come and be accountable to the people of Kenya. And the proposal by His Excellency the President, which I fully support and agree with, is to ensure there is full accountability by his government. Under normal circumstances, Honorable Speaker, any president or any member of the executive would be very happy to run away from oversight and to run away from questions by the people's representatives of the people. But we have a president and a government that is telling us they are open to scrutiny. They want to run a transparent and accountable government to the people of Kenya, and giving us as members of parliament and the people of Kenya the opportunity to grill and to take to account members of the cabinet. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, previously we have been in this House since 2013, Honorable Speaker, after the new constitution was enacted in 2010, and having had the privilege, together with the Honorable John Buddy, who was also in this House in the previous parliament under the old constitution, we've had the privilege to be able to learn and see for ourselves how effective has the process been of having chairs of committees come before members in this House to answer questions. And members will recall the difficulty chairs have had. You go and get a statement from the ministry, come read it out here. Members have follow-up questions for answers that you cannot provide as a chair of a committee unless then you go back to the ministry. We now have the opportunity to have the cabinet secretary in charge of interior come and stand before the House and tell Kenyans why are people being slaughtered in the North Rift by bandits and what he is doing. And if there are follow-up questions, Honorable Speaker, we'll be able to put them to the cabinet secretary, or that of education, on the question of the rollout of CBC and junior secondary. The pertinent issues that members have should have an opportunity to be addressed before the House. And it's not just addressing members of parliament or answering to questions, because I want to believe, Honorable Speaker, members of parliament don't come to ask questions for themselves. They ask questions and seek for statements on behalf of the people they represent. And therefore, in actualizing that role of representation and oversight, I want to implore the members that we do support this proposal to amend our own standing orders, and I must commend to having their report adopted by the committee and subsequent approval by the House. Honorable Speaker, the other proposal by His Excellency the President is one of creating the office of the Leader of Official Opposition. And I listened to my brother and colleague, the Honorable Pio Wandai in Mombasa, asking then why don't we go back to BBI? And I know it excites the Honorable Kaluma and John Buddy to mention BBI. But BBI is dead and buried. And you must socialize yourselves to that. And that is why the President has been very fair to us as a House, that he has not sought to introduce or reintroduce BBI in any other form, or even to coerce leaders to support any proposal that he has. He's not seeking to initiate constitutional amendments. He's seeking to initiate this general debate for us to enable Kenyans to have that public discourse, so that at the end of the day, we have provisions in the Constitution on how we can amend the Constitution. And one of the ways is a parliamentary process in this House. And we cannot run away from that responsibility, that we have a duty, we have a responsibility bestowed on us, and a mandate bestowed on us in the Constitution, that we have powers under the Constitution to amend any section of the Constitution except those that we call for a referendum, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, the issues that the Honorable President, His Excellency the President, has sought that we debate, and as a House, we make a decision on what we think is best. And Honorable Speaker, in my view, this general debate will not only inform Kenyans on the provisions of what we seek to do as a House in terms of amending our own standing orders or amending our Constitution, but also be inviting Kenyans to participate. Public participation is not only when we go out there to seek their views, as much as the committees, the relevant committees, will eventually do that. But even this, I'm sure as we sit here now, there are members who are seated here who are receiving texts and WhatsApp messages from their constituents. We thought on what Kenyans think is best for this country. And one of the things, Honorable Speaker, is the creation of this office of the Leader of Official Position. And I know, Honorable Speaker, I am aware that there are those Kenyans who imagine that it is another way of appeasing a particular person or a particular leader. Honorable Speaker, let me state for the record that this provision or this proposal is not to create a position either for the Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, neither for Kalonzo Musyoka, neither for Martha Karua, neither for Nyikal or John Mbadi. This is a position that we seek to create for posterity. Honorable Speaker, we did pass a constitution in 2010 and created the position of president, an executive president, a deputy president, and their running mates, Honorable Speaker, the running mate of the president and the runners-up in any election, Honorable Speaker, are left out there, not in the cold because they have a role to play. But we want to institutionalize the office of the Leader of Opposition to an extent that we have a system that can hold government to account. Honorable Speaker, I have seen our colleagues in the minority at times struggle because at times the leadership that they look up to is neither in this House, neither can they find them anywhere within the precincts of Parliament or around to offer guidance to them on how to effectively oversight and take government to account. And therefore, this is an opportunity that the minority will have meaningful leadership and an office that they can call up to for guidance and leadership. This is an opportunity for our minority to hold government to account and make sure the government delivers on what it promised the people of Kenya, even as those of us in the majority hold government to account as members of Parliament. Because we intend to, and we shall. And if you fail, those in the minority, those in the majority will make sure that this government delivers. Honorable Speaker, I see the Honorable John Mbadi laughing because he seems to doubt that we can hold government to account. And he knows when they went to bed under the handshake regime with government, and that is why I refer to government with the Honorable Nyikal. I told him, you are now in government. We are in government also, but we will do what you are failing to do. Honorable Speaker, if you allow me 2 more minutes, I was going to conclude, Honorable Speaker, to say that indeed, many of our supporters, I know those who support the minority, believe that this position maybe is an appeasement to their leaders. It is not. Many of our supporters, our own supporters, Honorable Speaker, are opposed to this proposal or have the feeling that this proposal is another sort of handshake. And I want to disabuse this notion, Honorable Speaker, that this position is not being created to appease anybody. We are creating a position for posterity. We are creating a position that will make the governance of our country better, that will only enrich.
Let's give him 1 minute, 2 minutes to finish, please.
Honorable Speaker, I was saying that this proposal will enrich, deepen our democracy, and make the structures of the governance of our country only stronger. I know, Honorable Speaker, there are those who want us to imagine that we need to go into a referendum, and therefore the push to go back to BBI that was seeking to create positions for individuals. Honorable Speaker, I have said we must disabuse that notion, even as we generally debate these proposals, that we are not seeking to create positions, because His Excellency the President and myself, as we traverse this country, we did promise the people of Kenya that we shall run, or His Excellency the President will run a government that seeks to create job opportunities and create wealth, not create positions for individuals. Therefore, this is not a position for an individual. It is a position for posterity. It is a position that will deepen our democracy. It is a position that will ensure that government is held to account, government is transparent, run transparently, and we offer meaningful leadership to our brothers in the minority, Honorable Speaker. And who knows, tomorrow it could be the Honorable John Buddy taking that leader of official position. It could be me. It could be anyone in the majority. It could even be the president today, you never know. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, we are just learning from other jurisdictions what happens and where we faltered as we passed our 2010 Constitution, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and ask honorable members to debate soberly and consider all these matters for the benefit of the people of Kenya, not for the benefit of any particular leader or for the benefit of anyone in government, but for the benefit of our country and deepening our democracy and ensuring that our country grows to the next level that we ought to be moving to. With that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and ask all members to support. Thank you.
Who will second?
Honorable Speaker, let me ask the Honorable member for Ugenya, the one and only David Ochieng, who happens also to be the party leader of the Movement for Democracy and Growth, MDG. You never know, Honorable Speaker, this could be the next president or next leader of official opposition. You never know. And let me ask him to second. But I do pray that at one time, he will be the first member of parliament from Ugenya to make it to the office of the President of the Republic of Kenya, when the Honorable Nyikal will be the leader of official opposition.
Amen to those prayers. Honorable Speaker, I beg to second and note that, Madam Speaker, throughout the ages and within our young democracy, we've made so many strides, Madam Speaker, through peaceful legal reforms, through peaceful amendments to our laws. Madam Speaker, you can only change society by having a conversation, having dialogue, agreeing every now and then what law works for you, what law doesn't work for you. And Madam Speaker, I believe that the President's memorandum is made in that light. He recognized the fact that Parliament has a big role to play in legal reform and that we need to have a conversation. And so instead of issuing an edict or doing what was called BBI at that time, he involves Parliament early enough, asks us, these are my thoughts on these matters. What do you think? That's what he's telling us, Madam Speaker, through this memorandum. And I want to thank our Speaker here for allowing time for this conversation, Madam Speaker, because we've come from far and we've changed so much. Our society has changed so much. In America, for almost 100 years, women never voted. Our democracy started with every one of us being able to vote. And so I believe that through nudging, talking to each other, reforming laws when necessary, Madam Speaker, we make our society better. And And so I want us to look at this memorandum from the president in that light, that we've been struggling with ensuring that women come to this house. And women who are here can tell you stories, Madam Speaker. You're one of them. And I've heard stories from women who are running for seats. I run a party, and I've had people who want to run talk to me about concerns they have, Madam Speaker. And so a way must be found to ensure that as a country, we make our women participate in politics meaningfully without being abused, insulted, or bullied, Madam Speaker. And where the numbers fall short, a way must be found to ensure that this Parliament and the Senate, Madam Speaker, is representative of the society. Our statistics show that women are more than the men in this country. But in almost every leadership positions, you go to county assemblies, Madam Speaker, county assemblies, National Assembly, Senate, the number of women being elected are low. And so I agree with the President that a way must be found to ensure that 97 members of Parliament, out of 348 are women. And how do we do that, Madam Speaker? The courts have spoken severally that we were not legally constituted. We've sat here, agonized. How do we get the best formula to ensure that women their numbers are as per the law? And so what is being proposed is, can you get a formula that if we already have affirmative action seats, 47 of them, considered, if you already have 26 members of Parliament elected as women, considered, what numbers more do we need to ensure that we have 97? So he's proposing that, can you get a formula where through the political party system, through independent system, through dialogue in this assembly, we're able to bring in 24 more women. In future, if the numbers fall short, you get a formula that is foolproof, that we know that if we elect 50 women, we'll have to bring in 47 of them. If you only have 60 women, we'll have to bring 37 of them. That's what is being proposed here, Madam Speaker, and I agree with this absolutely. The way must be found that if you cannot elect women, if Kenyans cannot elect women, we must still get women on the table of discussion, Madam Speaker. And in this regard, I want to request members, look at this in a manner that promotes their daughters, their mothers. If we're not promoting William Ruto as president, he doesn't benefit from this. So if you can get a way of doing this the right way, Madam Speaker, our country becomes a better country in terms of governance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when the late President Kibaki was alive, his opinion was that if the best devolution would better work at the constituency level. And I agree with him. Madam Speaker, if you go to our constituencies today, you look at the kind of money we spend on administering CDF, it's less than 10 million. Compare that with how much money the counties are using to employ staff for administration. It's 40%, some places 50%. Madam Speaker, if we entrenched CDF, if we entrenched GAF, if you allow Senate to have some resources to be able to go around to ensure that counting money is work well, Madam Speaker, we'll be better off. Because we need more money on the grassroots, not less. And no one said, and I don't believe so, that the only level of a devolution should be county governments. And I want to ask the governors, wherever they are, that the CDF will never give way. The money we receive in CDF today will never be sent to the counties. It will always remain at the constituency level. Now, Speaker, the work of a member of Parliament becomes easier, not because he fiddles with CDF, not because he puts his hand in CDF, but because through CDF, schools have been built. Children go to school. Now, Speaker, last week, and I've been doing this for the last 10 years, there's never been news in this country since I became MP in 2013 of a child in Ugenya who scored good marks, never going to school. And it's true for all constituencies, that we use that system to cater for everybody else that we need to cater for. If a child from Kwanza is called to Alliance, the Honorable Wanyonyi there is able to get money and send the kid to Alliance. If a kid from Sema is called to Mangu and he lives with the grandparents, through CDF you can pick it, and you're able to sort out the children throughout. We've seen how countries handle bursaries. It is so it's in corruption, nepotism, all these things, Madam Speaker. And so the best fund we have, the one that's close to the people, the one that serves the interests of the country with very little administration fees is CDF. We as a people, as Parliament, must support the President's word. Let's entrench GAF. Let's entrench CDF. Let's allow senators to have their money to go around the country to help make the governance better in this country. Madam Speaker, this country today, if we didn't have the opposition, and you know, all presidents in the world who had good intention, Madam Speaker, some of them come to be rogue. And we've seen how our country has been run. Parties have leaders. Parties have people who speak for them. You cannot tell me today in this House that the leaders that sit here as majority and minority are the leaders who make their parties move. There are people out there who lead these parties and who, after elections, lose their voices. What is being planned by this proposed amendment, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that those who hold the highest responsibility in their parties, those who run Wiper, ODM, Jubilee, whichever parties that they are, still have their voices after elections. They don't lose their voices as members of parliament, but by providing an office situation. The opposition is always the alternative government, Madam Speaker. And if we have an alternative government that cannot be organized, has no office, cannot be traced, Madam Speaker, it becomes difficult to organize. And so we want to be able to have a responsible opposition, one that can also be held to account. Because I believe that even the opposition must be held to account. We are all elected. They are being supported by the taxpayers' money. We must be able to know, what are they doing? How are they doing it? You can only do so, Madam Speaker, if you know where they are, if you fund them and are able to know what they're doing and ensure that they're doing their work rightly. And so, Madam Speaker, it doesn't matter whether the proposals were done through BBI, were done by Ruto, Raila, or whoever it is. What is right is right. It doesn't matter who says it. It is right to have a good opposition. It is good to have a country where critique is legalized, institutionalized, Madam Speaker. This proposal by the President proposes that we institutionalize opposition, ensure that you have a way of making those who go to elections and don't win elections at the national level can still operate in the public space. And we beseech members here, let's not look at these things as personality proposals, because I don't think all of us are going to be here forever. If you serve for 2-3 terms, you feel tired already, you want to go. Someone else will come in. Madam Speaker, I would like to look at these proposals far away from the person who wrote this memorandum. And look at these proposals as a member of parliament who believes in a good country, one that is governed by law, and look at them without having this hangers on that, oh, proposed what? Madam Speaker, I've been in this parliament now my 3rd term. It's been difficult. Madam Speaker, we go and queue. You can go to see a minister and queue for 3 hours, 2 hours. And there's no place to question them. Some ministers have reached their terms without anyone knowing even their names in this assembly. Because we don't know what they do, how they do what they do. There's no chance to question them. What is now being proposed, Madam Speaker, is not for them to come and sit on the floor, in this floor because they're not members, but to get a place for them where members of parliament can question them publicly. Proposals are being made that, oh, we can do them in committees, we can cover committee sessions live. Madam Speaker, having ministers come to this house at an allotted time, being questioned publicly, Mr. Speaker, will improve governance. It will make our work easier. Will make the work of their chairman of committees easier. Madam Speaker, we are not rolling back. We are making it better. We are improving our governance structure, Madam Speaker. Yes, you would say that why don't we then go the whole hog and make ministers come to this house? A very desirable position. But we are trying to make do with what we have. That before we change the constitution to make ministers come to the house, Madam Speaker, a way must be found to have ministers coming to this house, Madam Speaker. And I want therefore request members to look at these proposals for what they are, not the person moving them. Because if any one of us could still move these amendments and make them law, Madam Speaker. With those so many words, Madam Speaker, I beg to second and ask members to support. Thank you.
Honorable members, before I proceed, I wish to recognize the presence of students from Kanyakine High School from Imenti South constituency in Meru County. Honorable members, may I propose the question so that we can proceed to the substantive debate? Is that the mood of the House? I now propose that noting the contents of the memorandum submitted to Parliament by His Excellency the President, asking Parliament to consider initiating amendments to the Constitution, acknowledging that actualization of the proposals which relate to inter alia the composition of Parliament as provided for in Articles 97 and 98 of the Constitution, in order to attain the 2/3 gender principle, the creation of the office of the Leader of Opposition in Parliament and the inclusion of various funds in the Constitution would necessitate amendment to the Constitution while reconstructing of parliamentary oversight to allow the cabinet secretaries to appear before the Houses of Parliament to respond to questions by members would require amendment of our standing orders. Further acknowledging that the Speaker via a notification issued on the 9th of December 2022 referred the matters raised in the memorandum to the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. With regard to proposals relating to the implementation of the two-thirds gender principle and the establishment of the Office of the Leader of Official Opposition, the Joint Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, with regard to the proposals to amend to the Constitution to entrench the Constituency Development Fund, the Senate Oversight and the National Government Affirmative Action Funds, and the Procedure and House Rules Committee, with regard to the proposals to amend the standing orders to strengthen parliamentary oversight of the executive so as to facilitate public participation pursuant to Article 118 of the Constitution. Now, therefore, pursuant to the provisions of Article 1(2) and 95(2) of the Constitution, this House notes, considers, and makes general comments on the proposals contained in the memorandum by His Excellency the President. May I put the question? Okay. Oh, debate, okay. So. Oh, yeah, not yet. I think you'll have your turn, Emeritus. Member for Kangema, Peter Kihungu. The Honorable Peter Kihungu.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I start to support the motion. Madam Speaker, the issue of constitutional change on a parliamentary move is critical. And Madam Speaker, we need to separate the way the President has brought it from how BBI was brought. Because there is a difference, because the difference between how the BBI was initiated is that the former President, first of all, came up with a task force. The task force went to the public and started collecting views. Then after the task force brought the views, that's when now BBI was brought to Parliament. But here we have a different way of approach, whereby the President, as a President of the country, under Article 123 of the Constitution, 32 of the Constitution, is mandated to address the Parliament. And in his address, this was part of his address, then he follows it up with a letter, whereby he writes to the Speaker, and the letter reads, as I read verbatim. He says, nevertheless, I hold the firm belief that as a President, I can indeed and must engage authorized entities like Parliament. Accordingly, the purpose of this letter, dear Honorable Speaker, is to request the Parliament. Therefore, the President, what he has done a request to Parliament on his proposal. We can take the request or do away with it. But, Madam Speaker, the things that the President has put are extremely critical for this country. One way is that we must make our Constitution as a Parliament, and him as a President, he needs to be somebody who respects and honors and follows the Constitution. Because whenever, like the issue of CDF, as the court has put it, it looks extremely unconstitutional. But practically, the nation and the mood of the whole nation is that they need the CDF fund. But now, as the President starts with the members and the country to start with the CDF, he still fights that he's moving against the Constitution. Therefore, when we entrench it in the Constitution, we just make him also have powers to engage judiciary on being constitutional. But whenever the President also is seeking to them that let's allow the CDF to continue, even though there are issues that has been raised, he will be working against the vows he made to start by the Constitution. We have the issue of gender. The issue of gender as it starts today. There is a ruling that says that Parliament is unconstitutional, constitutionally constituted without the two-third gender. Now, when the President now requests the Parliament with his own wisdom on a formula that cannot be so burdened to our nation, a formula that can make, we make an amendment and we make it extremely constitutional. And the formula is very easy, whereby the president proposes that the gender rule should be tabulated in 290 constituencies, whereby you find that we have only to add around 24 women and we become constitutional. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish as members as we consider the issue of this amendment, let's look at it also as a parliament, whereby we are supposed also to be extremely constitutional. We are fighting for CDF, but as it reads, it's not constitutional. There are issues of gender, as the parliament is unconstitutional. The issue of opposition leader, everybody on the ground just says, this person who had over 6 million votes, he has almost half of the voters of the whole country who are behind him. And this person doesn't have an office. The leader of minority cannot take the position of the official opposition leader who was the presidential candidate who was following the person who took the position. Therefore, me, I'm looking at it that the president wants to bring an issue of constitutionality whereby you don't fight the person who was second after the president is just trying to fit, is just trying to beg for positions. That person should have an official office, should have all constitutional support that he needs as a person, whereby he doesn't need to beg for people to support him. He needs to be supported by the government. On issue mostly of this CS coming to Parliament, the CS hides in committees. If you reach the CS for water, the people he recognizes as leaders are members of the Committee of Water. The CS for infrastructure, he honors and respects the committee members, who are only 15 members. The rest 290, we are dealt with the second. Therefore, whenever it's brought here on an issue in Kangema, whereby the road has been left out, nothing is going on, when you visit his office, he just communicates with the committee members, he feels he's safe, but I can be able to question him here in the floor. Therefore, the issue of the CS coming on the floor is not mostly on small issues that can be managed by the committee. But there are areas as members of parliament, we must tackle them, we must question them whenever our public members can be able to hear how we are engaging with them and how we are talking about some of the issues has been left. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish we just look at this amendment as if it's not about the issue of the party, an issue of the presidency, but it's an issue of constitutionalism, whereby we will make everything constitutional so that even judiciary, we can be able also to target them. Now we can question them, then they tell us, you are telling us to be constitutional. How is your parliament? Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion, and I wish all the members to take the position we support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much. This chance goes to Honorable Gitonga Murugara of Tharaka.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to voice my support for this motion, which is pursuant to the memorandum we received from His Excellency the President, making certain recommendations. First and foremost, it's important we clear the air because there are